Welcome to the Fantasy Forecast with Grindberg and Biggs. I am him, he is he, you are you, and we are all together. We're talking Combine because guess what, Mike? Combine's next week.
Yeah, man. We are ready to get to some awesome week of testing happening coming up. And for those of you that don't know, the Combine is held annually in Indianapolis. It's a key event for NFL teams to evaluate the top draft prospects. But for fantasy football players, it's also much-watched spectacle. During the event, athletes showcase their physical and mental skills in a variety of tests, including the 40-yard dash that I'll be watching closely, the bench press, the vertical jump, to name a few. Fantasy enthusiasts, the Combine is where speed, strength, and agility can raise a player's profile, and they can fall down in the rankings. Some of the promising performances in the past really stand out. When you look at the Combine, there was a hiatus for a number of years, but when it came back, it was something that people really look for and watch. Tez Johnson had a great Combine back in the day. He ran a 4.24 40-yard dash in 2008. He was one of the fastest times ever, and his Combine performance, it translated to a career with over 9,600 rushing yards and a 2,000-yard season. So with some of these standout performances, Biggs, how much should we rely on the weight of the Combine results when predicting fantasy football success?
Well, let me tell you, Mike, there is a delicate and complicated matrix that goes into creating fantasy stars that includes not only the Combine measurements, the Combine testing results, but also draft capital. So going into the drafts for 2025, we are going to have to combine a whole lot of information. You can't just take somebody's 40 time at the Combine and say, I'm going to predict this about his performance. You can't just take his size at his position. You can't just take his college production numbers. You have to kind of incorporate everything and then look at landing spot and system. It's how people like Bucky Irving got lost in the shuffle because of his 40-yard dash at the Combine last year. And everybody kind of backed away from Bucky Irving. But the people who were lucky enough to draft him all of a sudden had a very productive running back who essentially outproduced his 40 time. Another example would be Jalen McMillan. Jalen McMillan was a guy that didn't wow anybody at the Combine. He had some previous college production, and some people were in on him and other people weren't. And boom, he has a brilliant second half of the season. So we have to take into consideration landing spot, team scheme, coaching staff, player development, college production, size for the position. Age is a big factor. Now, when we go through these players, we're going to give you our top 5 players to watch at the Combine, or at least who we are going to be watching very closely, because a lot of these guys have a good opportunity to, with a strong Combine, elevate them in their draft status. Now, there are 2 corollaries that I look at, and this is through Sumer Sports. Everybody can feel free to go to Sumer and look. And there are 2 corollaries that Sumer looks at. And number one is what Combine does, what metrics at the Combine does to help a player's draft stock, and then also how their Combine performance correlates to NFL production. What I'm going to be focused on is the NFL production side of it, because that's something that I can plant a flag on now and then deal with draft capital at a later date, later in April. So with that, the number one player that I'm going to be watching, or the first player that I'm going to be watching at the Combine, is Harold Fannin Jr. Harold Fannin Jr. is a tight end / big slot wide receiver coming out of Bowling Green University. Now, it's not a Power 5 school. It's an other school. It's a smaller school. So he doesn't have the competition level that a lot of other people have who are in the SEC or the ACC or Big 12 or whatever. And all that means is that you can't really take his production numbers at face value. Now, a lot of people really like his profile, and he was a Senior Bowl watch guy, had a rough couple practices, and then kind of turned it on later on in the week at the Senior Bowl and in the Senior Bowl game. But here's the thing about Harold Fannin Jr. He doesn't have prototypical inline tight end size, but what we're finding out is that that can be a detriment to production on a fantasy level in the NFL. According to Sumer Sports, the number one correlated combine statistic for the tight end position that translates to production is 40 time. Now, with other positions like running back, the 40 time is kind of negligible. Not many people know that, and they get really out over their skis about 40 time. But it is the number one correlation between tight end production in the NFL and their 40 time at the combine. Broad jump, vertical, 3-cone drill, and shuttle all kind of fall into place after that. And what that's telling us is that what we want out of a tight end is no longer somebody who is 6'5", because height and weight are negative corollaries. The bigger you are at tight end, the less productive you are from a fantasy perspective. So if we're looking at a guy who's 6'5" and 260 pounds at tight end, where an NFL team looks at that and says, that guy is another offensive lineman that we can put in 21 personnel, and he can be on the field and help us in the running game and maybe leak out and catch some passes. What we want is a big slot wide receiver who can line up off the line and go out and do route running. And what that takes is athleticism. So 40, broad jump, vertical, 3-cone, and shuttle. I'm going to be clocking Harold Fannin Jr.'s stats in those categories. And if he is among the leaders, among the top 2 or 3 of the tight ends in each of those things, he is quickly going to shoot up to number 1 tight end on my draft board.
Yeah, that's a good call, Biggs. I know he was a guy that some people are skeptical of his size because he's not that prototypical huge tight end that's going to get that blocking work. And we'll have to see where it goes, because his metrics in college were great. You know, he's got a great yards per route run. He's going to be a guy that they're going to be targeted. Some people have him in that same category as Kyle Pitts. So it's going to be one of those situations where, you know, we're going to have to watch and see. And I'm going to be looking at his metrics very closely as well, and see how he tests. Absolutely.
And that's what I'm saying. People talk about size at the tight end position because, you know, a GM wants a big tight end who's going to be able to block and has some athleticism. But for fantasy production, we have the 40 time as a 0.46 correlation. It's the highest correlation at the tight end position. That's at 0.46. Weight is at negative 0.21. So it's almost like 2/3 of deviations away from how good that 40 time tells you about production at the tight end position. And then height is a negative 0.11 correlation. So we don't want big tight ends anymore. Go away. Unless they have that athleticism that puts them in that top 2 or 3 at the combine, we don't want to have anything to do with them.
Yeah. And Schultze, what's up?
Hey. I like this guy. Biggs. Harold Fannin's pretty cool too. But the only thing I want to say about him, combine is a big deal here for him, right? You just explained it, but one note I have on him: 92nd percentile breakout age, 100th percentile dominator rating on Player Profiler. So if the combine numbers match, fire away. Biggs is right.
Yep.
Yeah, good call there, Schultze. Yeah, I mean, these numbers have to line up, and that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about numbers that need to hit in order for these guys to live up to this draft capital that some of these guys are putting them at. And a guy that I'm going to be talking about is also one that people are going to be really looking at because of his size. And I'm talking about Tez Johnson, and he's a wide receiver whose combine performance will determine whether he remains a coveted prospect or he just falls completely down draft boards and becomes undraftable. Known for his speed and quickness, Johnson had an impressive college career, including a standout 2023 at Oregon. But his questions about his size, durability persist. He's only 5'10", 160 pounds, his slight frame, and he does struggle against press coverage. It has raised concerns, but his skills as a dynamic playmaker in the open field make him an intriguing prospect. If he tests well at the combine, especially in these key areas like speed, agility, and explosiveness, Johnson could solidify himself as a guy that teams are going to be looking at as maybe the next Tank Dell. but special teams as well could be another situation where he could get into the lineup. But, had a decent 2023, 86 receptions at Oregon, 1,182 yards, followed up with 2024 with not quite such a good season, but 4.5 yards after the catch, which is good. It makes his ability to make defenders miss and turn out short catches into long gains. So the questions about his size, his consistency, and his, contested catch rate remain a concern. So Tez Johnson has the raw tools to be a dynamic NFL playmaker, but the combine is his chance to prove that his speed, agility, and versatility are more than enough to overcome his physical limitations. And if he performs, Johnson could go from a question mark to a fantasy, somebody that's on our radar. At least in a world of fantasy football, it's about testing your limits, and Johnson's moment is now. Biggs, what are your thoughts on Tez?
I got to watch him run routes at the Senior Bowl, and kid is good. When we got the measurables, the 156-pound profile kind of scared the crap out of me, but looking at my chart, height and weight are again the least corollary combine metrics. 40 would be the third least. So it doesn't matter if he's small and slightly built. That might translate maybe to like injuries, getting blown up by linebackers coming across the middle or whatever. But if he's agile enough and he's quick enough and shifty enough and twitchy enough, he can avoid contact. He can create yards after contact. He can do those things to keep himself safe. And his speed and size are not gonna matter a whole lot if his explosiveness is as off the charts as it looks when he's running routes. So I'm kind of excited about him. Now, I'm also going to stay at Oregon, or as we here in the States call it, Oregon. And it's kind of funny to me because last year we had Bucky Irving, Bo Nix, and Troy Franklin come out of Oregon. And they all played pretty well. Troy Franklin was kind of buried, but Bucky Irving had a really big year, and Bo Nix was a top 10 quarterback. And if there's one thing that we know about Oregon, it's that Nike can recruit, because basically they should be called Nike University or University of Nike. I'm looking at running back Jordan James. Now, Jordan James is 5'10" and 210 pounds. Okay, he's carrying the body type that is a little bit of a tweener. So he doesn't quite have the BMI that puts him into the bell cow range. And he's a little bit bigger than your smaller Jahmyr Gibbs style satellite backs. But he does possess the skill set to do everything on the field. He has a 40 time that is right now sitting about 4.45. And at running back, the 40 is the least corollary thing. So he can run in the 4.6. He can, like Bucky Irving did, run in the 4.7s. That's not gonna worry me. The thing about Jordan James is that he's an early declare and he's young. And the number one corollary statistic for running backs is age. It's one of the reasons I was so high on Braylon Allen coming out last year was because he was one of the youngest running backs in the class. Carry that over to this year. Jordan James is one of the youngest running backs in this class, but he also has the production to match. Weight is another one, 210. It's not your 225 limit, but it's still not terrible. It's not under 200 pounds. 3-cone and shuttle are the next. Broad jump, and then his height. And 5'10" is not too shabby. There are successful running backs that are 5'10", 5'11". So I'm really going to be looking for the 3-cone drill, the shuttle, and the broad jump. And what that signifies is his ability to, in small spaces, move and make people miss. And watching the tape, Jordan James absolutely has that. He also is a one-cut guy that he can plant his foot in the ground and then explode between two defenders and then be gone. He's a home run waiting to happen. So, Jordan James, I'm watching you. You guys out there in Fantasyland should be watching him too and watch him perform the 3-cone shuttle and broad jump. And if, again, just like Harold Fannin with the tight end metrics, if Jordan James is up there in the top 3, he is suddenly not a mid-tier RB 10 to 15 of the class. He's now into my tier 3 and probably in my top 6 or 7.
I like it, Biggs, and he's got that thing going for him. Double J, it's been Justin Jefferson, Josh Jacobs, all these guys have that going for them. So we'll see what happens. Yeah, there we go.
Jameer Diggs.
All right, let's move on to the next step where I think, we have got our top two guys here. People are waiting for us to, reveal them to them. And I'm going to talk about a quarterback that I have my eye on. I know that you have really high hopes for this quarterback headed into this season, and you have him pegged as your number one quarterback in this draft class. So I'm sure you're going to have your eye on Jaxson Dart, just like I will, the quarterback from Ole Miss, who's poised to make a major impact in 2025 if he performs well at the upcoming combine, particularly in a class where the quarterback prospects are considered underwhelming. After an impressive showing at the Senior Bowl where you were at there, Biggs, he showcased his strong arm, his mobility, and quick decision-making. Dart has emerged as a potential first-round pick. While he may not yet be guaranteed a top selection, his performance in Indianapolis could be a key to propelling him into the spotlight. At a standout combine performance would prove that Dart has the physical tools to exceed at the next level. And man, he threw for 4,200 yards and 29 touchdowns in 2024. He averaged 9 yards per attempt. He maintained a 65% completion rate during his college career. That showcased his efficiency. He also rushed for 1,500 yards and 12 touchdowns, demonstrating that his ability as a dual threat quarterback. He's 226 pounds. He's got the ideal size and prototypical that, you're looking for in an NFL quarterback. So this combine is fast approaching this weekend, and Jaxson Dart has the opportunity to show scouts that his college success wasn't a fluke. And if he can refine his mechanics, it'll boost his decision-making under pressure and showcase his athleticism. Dart might be looking at a first-round pick. What are your thoughts on that, Biggs? Do you think he gets into that level? Because if he doesn't, he may be falling way down into the draft boards.
Well, I'll start off by saying this. I don't have any quarterbacks on my watch list because the things that correlate to fantasy production at the quarterback position aren't shown at the combine. They're shown in breaking down statistics. One of the biggest corollaries that's starting to rear its ugly head is college experience. Now, according to the combine, age is a big factor. And traditionally, it has been that your guys who are performing at an elite level, matching the type of production that Jaxson Dart had this year, but when they do it as a junior, those guys are going to hit in the NFL. Unfortunately, there aren't a whole lot of guys who are coming out as third-year early declares at the quarterback position. And that's one of the reasons that people think that this is kind of a thin quarterback class. We don't have a Jaden Daniels. There aren't, but we've seen classes where there were some guys with a little bit of hype that absolutely fell flat on their face. The other thing is my academic background is science-based. And there's a thing in science where you don't want to come up with a hypothesis. You don't want to come up with a prediction and then do your study to try and justify that. You want to come up with your hypothesis and then throw every study that you can at it to show yourself why you're wrong. Okay? It's the fundamental idea of the scientific method. Try and disprove your theory or your hypothesis. And I've been doing that under the impression that Jaxson Dart was not the best quarterback in this class. And throughout all of my research, and when I say research, I'm not just spouting off. I interviewed this kid at the combine. I watched his combine practices. At the Senior Bowl. I interviewed him at the Senior Bowl. I watched his Senior Bowl practice sessions. I've done the film study. I've done the analysis of his statistics and everything, all trying to find a reason why I don't like this kid better than any other quarterback in the class. And I can't find a reason to. At every single level, when we have friends of the program like FF Coder that do their quarterback modeling, Jaxson Dart is the best in the class. When we look at his production, he has the cheat code that you want. He has the rushing upside. Adding 500 yards on as a rusher is the difference between Derek Carr and Bo Nix. You have a guy who's going to throw for 3,500 yards, but if he throws 500 rushing yards and 7 touchdowns rushing or 5 touchdowns rushing on top of that, now you're talking about a quarterback that gets into the top 12. With a situation like, say, the Las Vegas Raiders at the number 6, they can immediately go grab Jaxson Dart, plug him in, and he can have the starting job and the cheat code skills to be a top 12 quarterback as a rookie, just like we saw from Jaden Daniels this last year. I'm super high on him. He's my QB1. I think he's more polished. One of FF Coder's metrics in his QB model is college experience. Jaxson Dart has a lot of college experience. His rating is better than Shedeur Sanders. He's got upside more better than Cam Ward. There are so many things to like, and I cannot talk myself out of liking him more than anybody else in this class. So he is my QB1. The thing that I will be watching for isn't gonna happen with the combine testing results. What it's going to be is how the coaches and the analysts that are on the ground during the wide receiver sessions, when the quarterbacks are throwing to the wide receivers, how they are interpreting what Jaxson Dart is doing, because he's going to be throwing to a lot of guys that he's never met before. He doesn't have a relationship with. It's not going to be like him and Trey Harris, being best friends. It's going to be guys that don't know where the ball is coming from, what the spin is going to be like, how quickly it's going to get there. And he doesn't know what they're going to do. Are they going to round off their routes? Are they going to be sharp with the route running skills? Things like that. JJ McCarthy was the one last year who, during those throwing sessions with the wide receivers, the coaches were like, this guy has it. And that's kind of what I'm going to be looking for from the combine from Dart.
Yeah. Okay. I like that analysis there, Biggs. Now, before we get into your number one pick and, the one that our viewers are waiting for so drastically here, but let's talk about a place where our viewers can go in the off season, where community is where it's thriving. That's the Fantasy Sports Advice Network. It's our website. Go there. You'll find all our great content there, but also a community where you can go on there and get your questions, answers daily from the great community we have on the Fantasy Sports Advice Network. Now, Biggs, what do you got as our number one prospect that you are going to be watching at the combine this weekend?
Well, I was asked on a different show who I think could help themselves the most at the combine. And this kid that I'm leaning towards, he helped himself more than a whole lot of people at the Senior Bowl. I'm talking about TCU wide receiver Jack Bech. Now, Jack Bech had family involved in a tragedy. There was a terrorist attack in New Orleans, and his brother was in the crowd and was killed. And Jack Bech was honoring him. His brother was a wide receiver at Princeton. Bech used his number 7 instead of Bech's own number 18 from TCU for his Senior Bowl uniform. And he wound up and he went out and he caught the game-winning touchdown during the Senior Bowl, was given the Senior Bowl MVP. He also turned a lot of heads during the practice sessions because this kid is legit. He's 6'1", 214 pounds. So he has fairly standard multi-role build. He's from Lafayette, Louisiana, and was recruited by LSU as a tight end. That's a tiny little tight end. But as a wide receiver, he definitely flashes skills. His speed is not a detriment. It's in the 4.5 range, which is totally fine. He has incredible hands. He's got good short receiving skills, and he's really good at intermediate and deep routes. He was very, very fun to watch. He's strong. He's fast. He handles the catch point. He even was quoted. He was asked about 50-50 balls, and he said, I call them 75-25 balls because I catch them 75% of the time. I have a 75% chance of catching them. So when we're looking at the wide receiver position, the corollary statistics are age. That's, again, because what you want is a guy who's going to break out as a sophomore or junior, have a 1,200-yard season, have the dominator score, have all that stuff, but at a very young age, and then declare early for the draft. Jack Bech made a positional transition, So he's going to be a little bit older, so that's not great. However, what I'm looking for is his vertical, his bench, his shuttle, and his broad jump. Those are the corollary statistics for wide receiver. And again, just like with the other guys, if he is in the top 3 or 4 in each of those metrics, Jack Bech is going to shoot up my draft boards. I'm already looking at him as a value, as a sleeper right now. And that's kind of what we're doing with this combine stuff is we're trying to like separate the signal from the noise, and we're trying to find the guys who, while everybody is running a fast 40 time, this guy is showing the corollary statistics that actually translate to production. So while everybody is super high on Xavier Worthy, we're going at this guy who's going to turn into Brian Thomas Jr., right? That's what we're trying to suss out here. We're trying to look for those market inefficiencies, those values where you're pulling guys who are actually going to produce rather than the guys who are hyped. The only issue with that with Jack Bech is that he is going to be the story of the combine because the media is going to keep pushing the narrative of him and his brother dying and all that stuff. And everybody's going to know his name by draft day, right? So he's going to be, he might be a sleeper production wise, but he's certainly not going to be a sleeper narrative wise. People are going to know his name. But I want to make sure before I go and spend good draft capital on him, grabbing him in the second round of my rookie drafts, I want to make sure that he lives up to the vertical, bench, and shuttle. Those are pretty important. You need explosiveness. You need to get up. We know he can. He's a 50-50 guy. You need strength. You got a 22-year-old kid who's going up against grown men who are trying to put press coverage on him. You need to have some strength within the first 5 yards. And then the shuttle, you need quick feet. You need to be able to be agile in small spaces. So those 3 are very, very important. I'm looking for Jack Bech to wow us in those stats and be the sleeper that you all want to find later on in your drafts and go, that's what won me a championship.
There you go, Biggs. So we gave you 5 guys that we really are having our eyes on, and that's we got Harold Fannin Jr., the tight end prospect, Jordan James, the running back of Oregon, Tez Johnson, another Oregon wide receiver here, Jaxson Dart from Ole Miss, and then Jack Bech. A couple guys here that really are going to have to show well, and they're diamonds in the rough potentially here. So let's keep it rolling here. On our next show, we'll probably talk a little bit more about the combine, and then we'll do a post-combine report, kind of giving, analysis on how it all went down. And be sure to check us out here, always on the Fantasy Sports Advice Network. We're bringing you the heat day after day. Always check this stuff out on the website and on our YouTube channel, where you can find all our great content. Be sure to check out the Dynasty Pulse, which is now there on the network with Grindberg, Biggs, and Chev, Schultze, and Coach.
Yeah, we bring heat because that's how we bop.
We bop the heat, and so if you need some Dynasty content, be sure to check that out as well. Because we don't know what we're saying anymore at this point of the day.
Oh, I do.
Yeah, I don't.
The Oregon and Ole Miss is killing me.
I'm just very Canadian. You know what I'm saying? It's all good in the hood. All right, guys. So from all of us on the Fantasy Sports Network, what do we say, Biggs?
We hope you win.
We hope you win, folks. Peace.